Hello, my name is John Lance, and I'm doing a little screencast on the use of podcasts inside the classroom. I'm going to break this down by first explaining what podcasts are, why you should use them, and then uses of podcasts for both teachers and students inside the classroom, and frankly outside the classroom as well. So, what is a podcast? A podcast is essentially any kind of recorded audio that is user-created that someone can then download to their computer or phone. Something I found interesting in my research is that the term podcasting came about through a combination of the words iPod and broadcasting. I just always like to find the meaning behind some words like this. Something about podcasts is that they're incredibly versatile. You can find a podcast on anything from animals to video games to sports. I'm sure you can find a podcast on a weekly wrap-up of the news. And through some searching, really, if you have a niche interest, I'm sure there's a podcast out there. So why should you use a podcast? Well, the benefit of the podcast is that it can be listened to on the go. So say I create a podcast on uses of audio technology in the classroom. I could then upload it, and then teachers could then download it and listen to it on the go. So you can listen to it in the car, on the plane. As you can see from this picture here, if someone has a long commute to work and back, this would be a great opportunity to listen to a podcast. Think of it as anytime you might listen to music, you could also listen to a podcast. Podcasts are great because they allow the use of spreading ideas. Could you imagine listening to a podcast on someone from Yellowknife, Canada, all the way up in the Northwest Territories about their life and culture living so far north while you're in Albany, New York? That, in and of itself, I think, is a great use for podcasts. And last but not least, podcasts help connect people and students. As I said just previously, you can listen to recordings of different people all over the world. And that is something I just find incredibly interesting and useful. You can listen to a podcast on a teacher from Texas and what their day-to-day is like, and compare it to how your day runs as a teacher up here in Troy, New York. So, what are some teacher uses? Some teacher uses are you can give prompts to oral assignments online via podcasts. So say you have a podcast on a blog that students know to go to check for assignments. You could simply record the assignment on there, and then students would be able to listen to it, and they could listen to it multiple times if they don't have a clear understanding on it. You could also use podcasts to keep parents and teachers in the loop. I know sometimes, as I discussed earlier in a different video, that weekly newsletters don't always make it home. A teacher could simply record a 5-minute or 3-minute podcast on what the class is doing for the upcoming week or month, and then that's it. They upload it, and teachers and other parents can listen to it on their own time. And if you have a student with disabilities that is better receiving information through audio rather than orally or reading it off of a piece of paper, podcasts are a great way to record things, assignments, different lectures that the student could then download in their own time, be it at home, on the bus, in school, and listen to it. Also, what's cool is that as a teacher, you can provide your personal thoughts on something that's been done in the classroom. So, say your class had an excellent week, you could, out of the blue, record a short little podcast highlighting some of the great things the class has done this week, and tell all the students to give themselves a nice pat on the back. Likewise, you could record a small podcast on your thoughts on student work. So say there is a large assignment that requires different groups inside your classroom. You can respond to each of your groups through a podcast. I think sometimes it might be easier to listen to a teacher's thoughts rather than read them off a piece of paper. especially if they're providing constructive criticism. So some student uses. Create, create, create. We, in this day and age, have the opportunity to give our students a platform in which they can share their ideas and create their own works that they can then upload and their peers can listen to. That is something I think is incredibly cool and something we frankly couldn't have done 10, 15 years ago. Another good thing with podcasts is it teaches students to use technology appropriately. With students using phones and different technologies at younger ages, I think it's wise to introduce them to positive ways to use technology that will better their education. And last but not least, students can share and collaborate with other students with giving different ideas. Say there is that group project that 4 or 5 students are working on together. They can record different podcasts. Their peers can listen to them in their own time, and they can collaborate with each other. I simply think that the opportunity for a student to record something and it has their own spin on it, their own personal thoughts and feelings, and then upload it for the class to hear is an amazing opportunity. Could you imagine if in, say, a high school English class, the students just got done reading some Shakespeare? You could give an assignment as the teacher in which students must record a podcast explaining the plot of, say, Romeo and Juliet, except in their own words. So that way, their peers can listen to it and maybe understand the plot and some of the setting and characters better than they would by just reading. There are tons of different reasons and uses for students to have a podcast, and I think it's up to the teacher to explore those and see what fits best for their class and age group. I thank you all very much for listening. I hope this was informative. Thank you and have a good night.